All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Language of Behavior podcast. I'm so excited because, as usual, we've got not only the wonderful co-host Charlie Peck with us, but we also have a guest. As we've mentioned before in previous episodes, we're trying our very best to have very strategic and wonderful folks join us for the Language of Behavior. And monthly, you're going to get an opportunity to learn more about the work that other folks are doing around this country. And today we have the privilege and honor of having Kevin Hines with us. Charlie, I know you've been connected with Kevin. In fact, I think you've actually referenced Kevin before in previous episodes. So will you just share a little bit about how you were connected with Kevin and just the impact he had on you?
Yes. And Kevin, I'm so grateful for you to be here. So, for anyone who's listening, if you've heard me speak, you may have heard me reference Kevin Hines. And because Kevin and we interviewed each other on our podcast in the past, and I'm talking like 4 years ago. And then I've reached out to Kevin a couple of times, and he's such a busy guy. So this is truly a pleasure to have you here. So Kevin, that will all be relevant. Like we'll talk more about that. First of all, I just want to welcome you here.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm really excited to be with both of you, and I look forward to the interview.
Yeah, right. Because what you don't know is that you told me a part of your story that there's like a major part to it that people really stick to. But there's something that you said in your story that resonated with me personally that I now use a lot. I reference a lot. So, first of all, I think people need to hear the version of your story that you would like to share right now that pertains to why it's important that we understand what people's external language might mean or something they might be holding back. That's really what we're focusing on for people who are listening. So, Kevin, tell us any part of your story that you think people need to hear right now.
Well, first of all, Joshua and Charlie, thank you. I'll tell you. I think one of the most important parts of my story for people to understand is how I used to silence my pain and how so many people today do the same. In their most harrowing, most difficult, most trying times, they silence their struggles, they bury their pain. And when you bury your pain and you silence your struggles, they only bubble and fester and grow until they burst in things like rage, aggression, violence, substance use issues, eating disorders, suicidal thoughts, ideals, or actions. I've lived with all of those in my life. So when we hold all of our struggles inside because we don't want to be a burden to others, we end up devastating ourselves, eating away inside, and dying inside. And that leads to what I call lethal emotional pain and the compulsion to die by suicide. And so in my situation, before I ever leapt off the Golden Gate Bridge to try to take my life, to try to die by suicide, I fell into this routine of being quiet in my pain. I was having hallucinations, auditory and visual. I was having paranoid delusions, thinking people were out to get me, trying to hurt me and trying to kill me. I was having manias and depressions because once you go up, you must come down with bipolar disorder, which I was already diagnosed with at 17. At 19, it became too much of a weight to bear on my shoulders, and I did, in fact, leap off the Golden Gate Bridge. But if I could teach people anything, which is what I do around the world 300 days a year, it's to unburden yourself, unsilence your pain, tell the truth about your pain to just one other human being willing to empathize, because a pain shared is a pain halved. A pain shared is a pain halved. When you unburden yourself, when you tell the truth about your pain to one person who cares about you, you A, don't have to go it alone, and B, you can always survive your pain. I didn't know that back when I did what I did. When I leapt off the Golden Gate Bridge, I believed I was useless. I believed I had no value. I thought I had no worth, and I truly thought I had to die. But I was wrong. And today I know that suicide is never the solution to our problems. It is the problem. Suicidal ideations are the greatest liars we know. We don't have to listen to them. Suicide does not, cannot, and will not ever take the pain away. It only transfers it on to everyone who's ever loved you left behind and makes it wholly impossible for things to ever get better. But with time, energy, effort, and a great deal of hard work, things always get better.
All right. I know there's a lot we can say here. So I'm going to jump in here because what is so fascinating is that part of the story that you told me all those years ago, that when you were on your way, you were on the bus. You were on the way. You were at the bus stop. You got on the bus. You got off the bus stop. You were walking to the bridge. And you can correct me here, but this is what my understanding was, is that pain was so real for you right there. But you said, if anybody would have asked me if I was okay, I wouldn't have done this. And nobody did. And in fact, there were some other things that happened that I just can't believe. But that is what I share. And because we have to get people around people who are outwardly suffering, or who they think are even maybe suffering, to actually say something, because the worst thing we can do is say nothing or do nothing.
Yeah.
So I want to hear you respond to that.
Sure. Well, to paint an even clearer picture, my father that morning did try to reach me. But that morning, I was not yet ambivalent, what suicidologists and people who study suicide prevention call ambivalent. This feeling like you have to die, but the desperate want to live. I wasn't there. At the time my father tried to reach me, I only believed I had to die and nothing could sway my mind. But by the time I was on that bus to the Golden Gate Bridge, crying my eyes out, hoping, wishing, and praying someone would see my pain, say something kind and compassionate, and keep me from taking my life. But I couldn't say it outwardly. I needed someone to reach in. And so here I was on this bus, crying my eyes out, yelling aloud at the voices I was hearing in my head, leave me alone. I don't want to die. What did I ever do to you? Why do you hate me so much? I'm a good person, and having 100 people on that bus look down the barrel of the bus at me would say absolutely nothing, except for one man to my left who said to the guy next to him while pointing me with his thumb, with a smile on his face while laughing at my pain, what the hell's wrong with that kid? And that broke me. And, that when I got to the bridge and I got to the particular part in the walkway after pacing back and forth for over 40 minutes, crying like a child, where bikers and joggers and tourists and runners and patrol officers searching for suicidal people went by me twice, I get to this point in the bridge and I told myself the greatest lie anyone has ever told. Absolutely no one cares. Now, when I say that now, I say this in speeches. I say in keynotes. I say, how many of you would have cared? Everybody raises their hands. No matter where I am in the world, everyone raises their hands. People care. I couldn't see it. I didn't know it. I didn't believe it. I lied to myself. Thus, suicide became an option, right? And so when this happened, I lost my faith on the day I was on top of the Golden Gate Bridge walkway. I had a firm belief in God my whole life. And in one day, my faith disappeared. My father is fond of saying at baseball games with his buddies, Kevin found him on the way down. And in a sense, I did, because the only thing that I did as I fell from the Golden Gate Bridge walkway to the waters below was pray to God that I would live. And, in that situation, a woman driving by in a red car saw me go over the rail at the moment of my attempt and called her colleague in the United States Coast Guard, who happened to be manning the waters of the bridge at that moment. The only reason the Coast Guard got to my position in the water in a timely manner was because of that woman's phone call. in the water as I was drowning and I couldn't get back to the surface. Something very large and slimy began circling beneath me. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. I didn't die jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and a shark is going to eat me. Perfect. There was no shark. It was a sea lion. It was keeping me afloat until the Coast Guard would arrive behind me. In the hospital, as I was recovering physically from a 10.5-hour back surgery. Well, before that, one of the foremost back surgeons in the world was visiting the hospital for the day. He didn't even work there. He decides to clock in and they let him. He saved me my back and saved me the ability to stand, walk, and run. He did that surgery subsequently on 13 other Golden Gate Bridge jump survivors, saving their ability to stand. What I'm trying to say here is this life is the greatest gift we've ever been given next to faith. And in the situation I was in, I profusely prayed to God that I would live and that I would be okay. And I believe he answered my prayers. And I don't think I've answered your question, though. I went off.
There's no question. It's just a matter of sending the message that there are people that care.
Yeah.
It's just they don't know what to do. So that's what Josh and I are trying to do, is give people tools, give people awareness, first of all. And because it's important that they know that people, they don't know what to do. So what do we do when we don't know what to do? And that's when I always mention you in my keynote is I tell the story of Kevin Hines, because when you don't know what to do, you're probably going to do nothing. So how do we equip people not only with the knowledge and awareness, but with something to do? So that's what I would go ahead and lead into that, because there's so much to say here. I know.
Absolutely. So let's do a couple things. So let's say you're a person who loves someone or cares about someone who's actively suicidal. If you don't have the knowledge that they are in fact suicidal, but you have an inclination that they might be, here's what you do. You walk up to them, you say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? You sit down with them and you say, hey, I'm going to ask you a couple questions, but I want you to be 100% honest with your answers because I care about you and I love you. And I don't want you to worry about answering these questions. I'm not going to judge you. You're not in trouble, but I need to know the reality I need to know the truth from you if you don't mind. And they're going to say, what do you mean? What's going on? I say, just hear me out. And don't leave when I ask these questions. Just sit with me in this moment. I need to ask these questions because you mean the world to me. 3 questions. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Wait for the answer. Have you made plans to take your life? Wait for the answer. 3. Do you have the means? Wait for the answer. These 3 questions, according to the Crisis Text Line's AI algorithm, which is hyper intelligent and came out before the AI craze occurred, by the way. These 3 questions have been determined to get a more honest answer, statistically speaking, than the questions, are you thinking of suicide? And the question, are you thinking of self-harm? Because of the taboo on the word suicide and the fact that self-harm is by definition not suicide, it is self-harm. And so are you thinking of killing yourself? Have you made plans to take your life? And do you have the means? Get honest answers, because you are showing people you care and because they don't think anyone can read their mind and you just have, in a sense, right? And so what occurs is they go, how did you know? And then you're able to open up a dialogue about how to keep them here. And you say, look, I don't know what has led you to believe you have to take your life, but I know it has something to do with lethal emotional pain. I am here for you. I love you. And I would do anything in this world to keep you away from taking your life. What do you need from me in this moment? How can I help you? How can I be there for you right now so that you can stay? And then stop talking and listen to understand, not to respond. And that's the best tips those are the best tips I can give to someone who thinks someone is contemplating ending their life. Now, if you are the individual who is suicidal, let's take the flip side of the coin. If you're the individual who is suicidal, there are 2 things you can do when suicidal that will absolutely keep you from ending your life. These are the two things I have utilized for the better part of 24 years to stay alive with regular thoughts of suicide. Thousands upon thousands of suicidal ideations, never attempted again past the Golden Gate Bridge for 24 years. And here's how. The first thing I do is I find a mirror, anywhere, and I say these words. My thoughts do not have to become my actions. They can simply be my thoughts if they're dangerous to myself or others. Period. Full stop. My thoughts do not have to become my actions. They can simply be my thoughts if they're dangerous to myself or others. The second and most important thing I do is I turn to anyone willing to hear me. And I say 4 simple but very, very, very effective words. I need help now. The difference between me and people who attempt and die by suicide today is that I do not stop saying I need help now until one person is willing to answer the call, is willing to be my person in that moment to help keep me here. Usually it's my lovely wife, Margaret, but when it's not her, I have stopped a TSA agent at the Atlanta airport and told them I was suicidal. And they took me into a locked room and they took me with security guards and police officers, and it was a whole thing. And they thought I might be a threat. I said, no, I'm not a threat. I have bipolar disorder, and I'm thinking these thoughts about myself. Can you please help me get to my wife? My phone is dead. And that's exactly what they did. And they got me to safety that day. I didn't attempt. I had to go back into the psych ward. My last psych ward stayed in 2019. But here I am talking to you. And so it works. Mm-hmm. And so those two things, if utilized accurately, can keep anyone, anywhere, anytime from suicide.
Yeah. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm thinking like as the educator that it's because you've mentioned like at the age of 17 and 19 struggling with this quite a bit. And obviously we've got to see where it ramped up to the point where you're jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. But as a student, I'm curious what those maybe behaviors look like, or maybe, what educators were seeing in the classroom that kind of gave a hint that something's going on with Kevin, that he's either depressed or he's having these ideations of suicide. And did any teachers help you through your journey when you were a student to work through some of that? Or was it so deep that you just tried to hide it and, it got to where you were 19 years old taking these actions?
This is a really important conversation that not a lot of people ask me about. And so I really appreciate that you asked me, Joshua, because this is not something I get the opportunity to talk about too much. So 2019 was when I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. Pardon me, the year 2000 was when I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. Okay, at 19 years of age, right? But at 17, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was having behavioral changes and mood shifts and all these things. And at 17, nobody really knows this, but I had attempted to take my life as well. And I was in the middle of attempting when two things occurred. I heard a song by DMX on my CD player. So it was back in the day when CDs were a thing, where he says, "Lord, I'm in so much pain. Please take me away." And then you hear God say, "No, I put you here to do a job and your work ain't done. To live is to suffer, but you're still my son. And there will be a time when you shine as bright as the stars, but there won't be a his or hers, just ours." I put down what I was doing, and I picked up the book, The Rock Says, and I read a passage about defeating depression through faith that I happened to open the book upon. All those things together stopped me from doing what I was doing, right? But I never told anybody. And the behavioral changes that occurred to me, that people, if they had known about the topic of suicide or the topic of depressive episodes or mania, they would have seen prior to my attempt, the 2 years prior, that I was missing classes. I was arguing with my teachers. I was getting in fights with other students. I was either eating too much or not eating enough. I was either sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. These things became a constant for me, these aberrant, odd behaviors that I wasn't experiencing before I got sick. And I think that had anyone been paying really close attention to this, they would have known something was off with Kevin. And there were even counselors that did try to intervene and say, hey, especially when I attempted, because one of my it's called a life student in high school. It was part of the life program. And he saw what I had done to myself, and he goes, hey, what's that? And I was like, I tried to do this. And he took me to the counselor. And I'll be very frank with you. When it's hard to talk about, but when my parents found out about it and came to the counselor's office, they said, you didn't do that. We don't believe you. You wouldn't do that. My son wouldn't do that. And that was the reaction. That's not their fault. They didn't want to believe that their eldest son would attempt to take his life. And I can understand that. I can empathize with that. But, if we had taken a more realistic approach to that situation, maybe the bridge would have never happened. It's in hindsight. I can't say that for sure, but I'm just saying it's definitely a possibility. So what I want to say to parents out there who are worried about your kids or frightened of what they will do when you ask them if they're okay, or if you ask them if they're thinking of killing themselves, do not be afraid of those questions. If you don't ask, you'll never know, and then they could die. If you do ask, at least you have a barometer to discover, are they considering suicide? And that, I think, is the most important technique you can use, is to be honest about the question, be honest about what you're worried about, and tell them you don't judge their answer, but that you've got their back.
Yeah, I think that's really important that you say that too, because there's a lot of things that come out of this. First of all, like, what skills do we actually need to teach people? Because that is the piece. So it sounds like, and this is what we're trying to do here, is self-advocacy. So I need, right? Self-awareness is I am, this is how I'm feeling, get back into our bodies and understand the manifestations of our thoughts, our emotions, and how they show up. And the behavior is often how that happens, as you have talked about. So there's a couple of questions I have about people, and namely parents or caregivers. What about if the child is not actively in SI? They're not actively thinking suicide in that moment, but you suspect that it might come up, or they feel alone and you worry that might happen. And I mean, what do you do there?
I think if they're not actively in that situation, but you worry that it could be a potentiality down the line, you still need to have the conversation of what is suicide at the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table in your family. The youngest person in America to die by suicide, it's my understanding, was 7 years old. People ask me all the time, how does a 7-year-old know to take their life? And it's probably through mass media and things they've seen, right? So what we need to do is understand that if they're not in that place, but they could be, we still need to have the conversation of, if you ever get to that place, here is who you go to. Here are the 3 adults you go to in that situation, including myself and your mom or dad, or your aunt and uncle, or your grandma and grandpa, whoever the guardians are. You come to us, we will protect you from yourself. And that suicide is not the answer, it's the problem. And that you can always come to us with those thoughts. There's nothing wrong with you for those thoughts. You're not bad for those thoughts. It's not your fault to have those thoughts, but we are here with you. And if you ever come up with these things in your mind, we beg of you, come talk to us. We will support you.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up something else here, because I've heard this from parents and caregivers a lot, that their kid has been in active suicide. Like, they've gone to the hospital, they've often threatened it, quote unquote. I say, let's be really careful about that, but this is how they present it to me. And they feel manipulated. They feel like they often do this, and I don't know what to respond to. And frankly, I'm tired of hearing about it. Again, I know, but I hear this. So how do we address that?
All right, parents. All right, parents. If you feel manipulated by your child, that involves a long-lasting lack of communication that has been made norm in the family. We're not blaming you. We're not saying it's your fault. We're saying that something has occurred in the family to allow your child to not want to confide in you for their deepest and darkest pains and secrets and troubles. So start opening the conversation without judgment, without getting annoyed or feeling overrun by this kind of activity. You say to your child, look, when you are struggling, I am your first response. I'm your first responder, no matter what. And if there's, the problem I have is when I travel around the world to high schools all over the planet, I meet kids who come to me and say, I have this diagnosis, but my parents don't believe it's real. Yeah. I have suicidal ideations, but my mom and dad get mad at me when I talk about it. I have this kind of trouble, but my parents tell me to suck it up. That's not a child issue. That's a parent issue. And if we're going to be better parents, we need to listen, as I said, to understand, not to respond often enough. And we need to stop blaming our kids for struggling. If they're having a hard time, we need to step up and be their solid rock, their uniter, their hope, their healing, and their recovery. And so, lack of any blame to the parents, but let's try to move forward in our thought process about when it comes to brain and mental health struggles and issues and disorders. And let's try to be more empathetic to our children whose brains haven't fully developed yet, who know not what they're doing when they're doing it, and who need our guidance and help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kevin, I know that you do a ton of work. Like you've said, you go and you speak and you support so many folks, not only in this country, but like you said, all over the world. So I've been putting up your website for everyone to check out who's watching on YouTube. But for those who are listening on audio formats, will you just let them know your website and how they can connect with you on social media?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So kevinhinesstory.com. Obviously, you can put anything in the contact page there and reach out personally, share your story. If you want to book me there, wonderful. At Kevin Hines Story across all socials. And then youtube.com/Kevin Hines has thousands of videos, all designed to better your brain health or the brain health of someone you love who's struggling. And then we are now working on, I don't know how many people know this, but I'm a filmmaker. My wife and I make documentaries and narrative films on suicide prevention, brain, mind, behavioral, mental health, spiritual health, and well-being. They're entertaining, they're educational, they're intriguing, and they're humorous. So we try to cover all topics there and all bases. The new film I'm working on is called The Net with my good friend, Zach Williams, who is the late, great actor Robin Williams' son. He wrote the foreword to my book. We became fast friends, and we're now making a movie together on the 90-year effort to end death at the Golden Gate Bridge, the 7 fights that failed, and the current effort that has led to an 83% reduction in suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge. My family and I fought, my father specifically, and my wife and I fought for the better part of 20 years to raise the net at the Golden Gate Bridge alongside some incredible advocates and people who lost their loved ones to the Golden Gate Bridge and suicide prevention advocates at large. We got to help raise the net alongside the construction workers in real time. And when that happened, in 1 year, suicides reduced by 83% at the Golden Gate Bridge. And they hope to close the only gap that still exists there so that people can never die off the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's the entire goal. The Bridge Rail Foundation now has turned its eyes to helping raise nets and railings around the world to reduce suicides, because reduction of access to lethal means we know saves lives. And this film, The Net, will be a catalyst to doing that all over the world.
Wow. When can we see this? Like, when is it going to be ready?
It's likely going to come out in 2026, but we'll keep you updated.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. There's so much more that we could talk about, but I will say, anybody listening, if you are a leader of an organization and you want to address suicide head on, like, this is a story you need to tell. You need Kevin to come in as your keynote and tell this story, because we do need to equip other people with the words and the courage to actually ask those questions and never feel alone in this again.
And friends, if you feel like helping our film, it's thenetmovie.com.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure that all of those links are in the show notes, both for kevinhinesstory.com, but then the social media, YouTube, and then Kevin, that link for folks to support such an important film. And I just ask everyone that's listening that you check out more of Kevin's work, as he's really making an impact on such an important topic that is really hitting home with a lot of students and young people, as this is something that's growing as far as people being able to communicate about it, but also the feelings that are existing. And so, Kevin, we just appreciate your time, your story, you being so transparent and open about, the journey that you've had. And I know it's making a great impact around the world.
Thank you both so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.